OP-09 introduced new, interesting and strong leaders. On top of that, we received cards that brought some of the older leaders higher in the tier lists. Let's take a look at the best decks to play in OP-09 meta. Starting from the top, Blue Doflamingo. It's probably not surprising to anyone that this deck is still considered by many as the best deck in the format. Even though Dofi didn't receive any new cards from OP-09 set, previous amazing prints from starter deck 17 are more than enough to stay on top. But why is that? Traditionally in trading card games we have a triangle of aggro, tempo and control decks. However, in One Piece card game tempo is one, if not the most important characteristics. Blue Doflamingo deck is combination of strong early threats that easily swing tempo to your advantage. As long as you draw and play Jinbe early, you are good to go. Some players even joke that he is the true leader of this deck. With addition of 2-cost Blackbeard character, we are able to choose going first in most of the matchups and build advantage with early board presence and powerful 7k leader swings. The Doflamingo deck building is quite straightforward. As long as you play Jinbe with Ilboa and Bouncer low, you are good to go. Rest of the cards you can adjust to your liking. Gameplay is straightforward too. Go first, play Blackbeard or any fixer like Perona early and start swinging 7k with your leader's effect while spamming the board with 6k power characters that are very hard to contest in the early game. Once your opponent tries to develop any 4-cost characters, bounce them with 4-cost low for huge tempo advantage. In case of any 6-cost or less characters, you can just clear them with Jozu or Gravity Blade and keep pushing. Deck is simply too fast for most of the opponents in the meta. For the unfavored matchups, you should be mindful of Black-Yellow Luffy and Yellow Enel. If your local meta consists mostly of these leaders or you expect to play more than 2 in any big event, it might be better to not bring Doflamingo to the event. Even though you can high roll every game to oblivion, deck heavily relies on your understanding of fundamentals of the game. On top of that, mirror matches might be tiring. So choose this deck only if you are committed to practice a lot and already have a good grasp of fundamentals of the game. Next I have for you new OP-09 leader, Marshall D. Teach, also known as Blackbeard. Finally a black deck that doesn't rely on Gecko Moria. Simple yet powerful effect. Your on-play effects are negated, but also if you trash one card, on-play effects of your opponent are negated for a turn. If I would have to say what are two the best decks in the meta right now, it would be Doflamingo and Blackbeard, because in my opinion they are symbiotic. Dofi is too fast and keeps in check other decks that could threaten Blackbeard approach to the game. On the other hand, Blackbeard negation of on-play effects might discourage a lot of Dofi bet matchups from being played. For the Blackbeard decklist itself, I think it's more or less solved in OP-09. I think there are more or less 2 flex slots that in this list are occupied by Ice Age for additional cheap cost reduction, but players were experimenting with Manchery, Tempest Kick and many other choices based on preference. Your early and mid-game plan is to control the board of your opponent through cost reduction and removal. On top of that, negate on-play effects, and apparently you are playing against vanilla characters. Stall long enough to get to the Tendon turn and drop one of the most unfair boss monsters in the game, the Blackbeard himself. 12k blocker, negation and attack prevention for the turn. If you successfully control the board, then once this bad boy enters the field, the game is sealed. Your only weakness are any fast decks that can overwhelm you. If you can't clear the board fast enough or redirect opponent's attack into your rested characters, you will get run over. So your natural enemies are Dofi and Purple Luffy, but if you dodge them, then the world is yours. Something to note though. To play Blackbeard you need to understand every matchup really well. There is a clear difference between good and great Blackbeard players, and one mistake might cost you the game. I feel it's like Rebecca back in a day, in the way that she was countering a lot of strategies in the East, but didn't end up so popular in the West. However, this time it's Blackbeard baby, so I hope we will learn the deck and show its full potential in the West as well. Next we have the leader that received the biggest buffs in OP-09, Purple Luffy, also known as PCP, which means Perfect Curve Purple. I love this deck. Luffy already received a lot of support in starter deck 18. On top of that, OP-09 brings consistency in form of Searcher Low and the most broken event in the game, 1-cost Gum Gum Giant. If you are just starting the game or want to practice fundamentals but not stress yourself with playing Blue Doflamingo, Purple Luffy is the deck for you. Game plan is very simple. We want to abuse Perfect Curve Purple, which is win the dice roll and go first. Play Searcher low to find 4 drop for the next turn or Luffy Taro pieces. On the turn 2 we use Leader's effect to ramp into 4 Don and drop Zorojuro for another third chance to find Luffy Taro pieces. Turn 3 we use Leader's effect once again and reach the most important number, 7 Don. We drop Luffy Taro together with, for example, Sangoro, and the mid game is ours. 2 6k characters and 8k character on board on turn 3. Disgusting. Next turn, depending on the game state, you can develop another 7 cost, or if you don't feel threatened, use Leader's effect and drop 9 cost Luffy while looking straight into your opponent's eyes. At this point you should manage to finish the game. But you might ask, hey Raccoon, if Purple Luffy is so great, why do you think Doffy and Blackbeard are the best decks in the meta? Answer is really simple. Sooner or later you will lose dice roll. Going second is not so sexy with this deck. You can feel huge power level difference between going first and second. Yes, you can still play 5 cost Kid on turn 2 and preserve the life by refunding Dawn on turn 3 from Luffy Taro, but it might be too slow in some of the unfavored matchups. You also have an option to turbo ramp into 9 Dawn if you opt to play Bonclay on turn 2 and use Leader's effect twice, which will result with 9 cost Luffy or Big Mom on board on turn 3. But that's about it. And your unfavored matchups are Bonnie and Blue Doffy. If you don't go first in these matchups, you might be cooked. However, I think Purple Luffy might be amazing pick for online tournaments or overall tournaments without top cut. Just stress-free, be lucky enough to win dice, and roll 9 rounds for the win. Next, new leader and the last of the big 4 in OP-09, Akagami no Shanksu, the coolest leader in the game. We had to wait for 9 expansions for playable Shanks leader, but here he is, and on top of that in the red color identity. How cool is that? His Leader's effect is straight up haki from manga and anime, minus 1000 power on one of your opponent's characters when they attack you. Big fan of defensive effect like that. Green Bonnie is okay, but Shanks is just amazing. If you played Whitebeard in the past, Shanks might be your new favorite leader. You just chill early and mid game, but once you hit late game you overwhelm your opponent with chain of big bodies like Riley, Shanks or even Goldie Roger. If this is not the coolest deck team ever, then I don't know what is. There are some very important deck building choices though, and many different lists are being tested. For example, you can play 5 cost Riley as a blocker or 4 cost Lucky Roo. However, we saw in Asia that most Shanks players cut Lucky Roo out of respect to Bouncer low. On the other hand, Lucky Roo is quite useful into Purple Luffy matchup. So decision is yours, are you more afraid of Blue Doffy or Purple Luffy? One of the coolest discoveries is inclusion of Red Hawk. By the game rules, Shanks effect applies before countering. So you can minus 1000 any of 5k power characters to bring it down into Red Hawk range, and then not only counter the attack, but also KO said character. Shanks fighting arm to arm with Luffy to take over the game. What a flavor! For the unfavored matchups, if you are unlucky enough to play against Nami, you might be simply too slow to win. Also, depending on the build, you might get overwhelmed by Blue Doffy or Purple Luffy. So build accordingly to your expected meta. Keep in mind that Shanks is very fundamental heavy deck, so every card choice and turn matters based on your knowledge. Because of that, players already call Shanks the fair leader, but nonetheless one of the strongest. I think these 4 leaders are the big 4 of the OP-09, and we will see them the most either in Top Cut or winning the tournaments. If you plan to bring any other deck, please build accordingly to have a fighting chance in this environment. Next, I have for you Memory of the Past. 3 leaders that dominated 8.5 meta and are still good contenders in OP-09. Black Yellow Luffy, Black Lucci and Bonnie. Even though they didn't receive any meaningful upgrades in OP-09 set, they still have a fighting chance in tournaments. However, there is one new consideration. Can you beat Blackbeard? Existence of this one deck changes deck building and game approach forever. For example, if you plan to bring BY Luffy to the tournament, you should be able to win against most of the Blue Doffy players. However, are you prepared for Blackbeard? One of the most common tactics is to maximize Makino to speed up Awakening and rush Blackbeard down, but it's still unfavored matchup that can bring a huge headache. If you expect Red Shanks to be highly represented in the meta, you might opt to bring Black Lucci. However, once again, I will be asking you, what about Blackbeard? For this matchup, a lot of Lucci players adapt by playing 9-cost Kaido. Nonetheless, still unfavored matchup. And lastly, Bonnie, same situation like BY Luffy. Even though you should be favorable into Doffy, the blocking point might be Blackbeard. And even Blue Doffy includes at least 2 copies of Gravity Blade now and Jozu, so winning good Doffy player might not be so easy. Don't get me wrong, these 3 leaders are still amazing and I expect to see them in top cut or top of the scoreboards. I just don't expect them to win many tournaments. Next I have for you 2 leaders that I call gatekeepers. Most of the One Piece community hate to play against them, and it might be a good enough reason to bring them to the tournament. Yellow NL should be able to clap Blue Doffy, but that's about it. Any other matchup that is not aggro, it's enough that your opponent understands fundamentals of the game to put you in the difficult spot. On the other hand, Nami thrives in slow metagame, so as long as you are able to dodge Blue Doffy and Purple Luffy, you should be able to climb the rankings. And even against Doffy and Luffy, if they are not too experienced with the matchup, or you get lucky with triggers, they might be in for an unpleasant surprise. Lastly, I have the Underdogs. In my opinion, these decks have a chance to get some upset wins or at least one of them to finish in top cut. Bello Betty received amazing support this set and low-key, it's my favorite off-meta deck. Classic aggro approach. Spam the board with characters, buff them and push. Win by overwhelming your opponent or die with a smile. Smoker might be nice alternative to Lucci players. 5-cost Tashigi is a queen and can carry a lot of matchups. Lastly, Purple Black Luffy. There were high expectations for this leader, however, 4-life leaders in the current meta have a tough life. Nonetheless, deck has all the tools to stay competitive. But there is one more deck I think you should play, and it's your deck of choice. In such diverse meta, I think it's really important to rely on comfort going to the tournament of 9+ rounds than on any tier list or player's opinion. If you know your deck very well, you practice hard and you are prepared for the mentioned matchups, then just pick it, play the tournament and take those wins. And even if you don't win, at least you had fun trying. And this is the most important thing in my opinion about card games. But that's it for today. Let me know down in the comments your favorite OP-09 deck. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.